Okay. Okay. Oh, still on a crusade. Who isn't on a crusade these days? Okay. Hey, I stand saying that word. Okay. What bothers me is manufacturers and the home theatre market or home cinema market, which depending on what country you live in, what bothers me is all this EQ and, that they like to today, they like to call it, well, room EQ, room EQ treatment. How can it be, how can it be called possibly room EQ treatment when you apply the EQ? It's probably making the loudspeaker even worse. I mean, one, the whole system is only programmed to identify as close as possible the distance from the microphone to the speaker and only guesstimate how far away it is, and the type of, resolution used, which should be high resolution. The lower you go down with the, octave smoothing to make it look like, "Oh, wow." It looks like the frequency response on a processor or an amplifier, when you measure it electronically, the frequency response is pretty smooth and flat. But when you measure a loudspeaker, even up close with a microphone, it is very thumpy. It's up and down. It doesn't follow the same flat response as what the processor or the amplifier direct signal is. Um, you can do the overlays with the Room EQ wizard and, uh, apply the overlays, and then you can see how it differs, and then think, "Right, that needs to be easily corrected with the EQ." And, which will be done in smaller ways, and some maybe a little bit light. It depends on the, say, like, for example, you have um, a crossover slope, and you want that crossover slope electronically is A-OK, but does the loudspeaker apply its frequency response smoothly to that crossover curve, which is probably no. Um 'Cause you can run the test over and over and over, and then you see that, there's something going on, you know? Um, it's not an ideal, situation. Uh, anyway, the rooms themselves, I mean, to call this room EQ is absolutely absurd. It's just such misleading in marketing. It's just another word It's just another phrase of words put together just so that they can grab the consumers for their market. I mean, everyone's got all their different algorithms for their different EQs. I mean, crikey, I've got how many processor AVRs have I got with different? I've got a Yamaha with an Opa. No, I've never used it. I got Odyssey, which is mostly on Onkyo AVRs. I think a Denon and a Marantz. Uh, I've used Odyssey, and the result was absolutely appalling. It was so atrocious on the playback. And I was thinking, what is wrong with the frequency? What's going on with the sound of my JBL um, HF horns? Or was it the bass driver? I can't remember which, where it applied a excessive peak around the 500 where the crossover region was, and the Odyssey couldn't tell what type of crossover was being used, whether it was passive, active, or DSP. It doesn't know. These EQ things, they don't have any idea what crossovers, what loudspeaker management system, or what speaker you got. Unless there is, I think there are some where there is a database uh, of so many speakers that have been tested, so that the system should be able to determine the characteristics of that speaker. Anyway, um, the, the room EQ treatment thing, it is misleading. If it was treatment, then it would be applying actual physical treatment to the ceiling, to the walls, to the floor, which it doesn't. It's just it's just another EQ that's um, a little bit that is DSP, and it's just got a little bit more PEQ filter bands to apply over everything else that's come along that's had limited PEQ filters because of the technologies and such. Realistically, the amount of PEQ filters that should be needed after looking at it, my say is about 20,200 PEQ filters, and that would be more than enough to correct a loudspeaker. Plus, it needs a heck of a lot of CPU memory data, memory. What do you call it? CPU. Otherwise, the whole thing will just crack up. It wouldn't be able to apply because there wouldn't be enough uh, power. Yeah, you need a lot of channel output, and they need the same amount of PEQ filters because a frequency response is starting from roughly 20 to 20. That's 20,000 filters. That's 20,000. That's a lot. And you need a little bit more to go a little bit down into the low frequencies, into the infrasonics. So about 20,200 would be about enough, which there isn't. The rack live doesn't even have that amount. and it's still at the end of the day, it's using some, um, octave smoothing to, apply to give the illusion that the frequency is absolutely spot on, and measuring a speaker at a listening position is absolutely absurd in a room that is not even gonna be ideal. It it's gotta be a room that's absolutely, geometry-wise, it's gotta be absolutely perfect, which is not impossible to, find a room or build have a room like that, or even test it outdoors, in a very quiet space, which is not impossible to find. Um, and then you test the speakers outside. So they're all measured, everything's measured and calculated, and then the microphone's placed in a position, and then you run the frequency response. And you shouldn't have to move that microphone to seat because really, when you do that, it's like string that's crooked, and then you pull it straight, and then you get a nice flat frequency response, whether it's you know it's curving downward or whether it's going upward, or if it's going totally flat. But then our hearing wouldn't hear those. Well, the only thing that's going to hear that flat is a microphone, uh, or you look at it RTA response directly, and it's like, oh yeah, wow, look at that, how flat it is. It's not like this anymore. It's now flat, you know. But it needs to go upward. It needs to have a slight curvature where it's going upward. Otherwise, we won't perceive the high frequencies very well. They'll just drop off because our hearing range is dropping off on the high frequencies, and the risk of boosting the frequencies or having amplifier power that's can provide enough power without any strain to the amplifier, and providing the components, the mid-range, the tweeters particularly, because that's where the high highs are gonna be, and then or a HF horn, um, that's got a very good design, and it can take the strain and such with, uh, with headroom as well, because you've got to have some headroom. Headroom being that there's got to be enough area coverage for the frequency to play without distorting. Uh, Not that I think we would be able to notice those distortions if it was in the very high frequencies, 'cause they're going to sound very small. Or it depends on, like I say, depending on the speaker component, the amplifier power, and having these narrow wavelengths increase. But I'd imagine, oh, getting near to 20,000 kilohertz, I'd imagine 16,000, 15,000 frequencies around there, or would be, well, it would, it's got to be measured and SPL level checked as well. Otherwise, it would end up causing us a lot of discomfort. Would be pulling faces like like that because it's on the very, and depending on the angle of the speakers and such, and the sound coverage being checked to see how many dips and peaks and knolls there are, and then angling the speaker until an almost smooth coverage range over the seating is achieved within plus and minus dBs. Otherwise, um, you know, uh, EQ can't correct that. Seat to seat, it's impossible. Just as it's not like a flight deck on a space shuttle where the engineers, when all the crews tucked up s- and s- and harnessed into the seats, and and then the hatches closed, and then they fill the cabin, they fill the flight deck up, they fill the shuttle up with air, oxygen, or the up to a certain psi, pounds per square inch, which is always will be the same for every shuttle, and that pressure will be completely equal all over the entire flight deck. And it's something that we can't see, just like sound waves, we can't see it. We can hear it. We could we would sense pressure in an airplane when a regular airplane is going on ascent, and then it's starting to equalize rapidly to compensate, because going from ground to to ascent to where the air pressure will change, and it's got to be balanced. And then we feel this discomforting on our ears, where our ears get pushed slightly inward because the air cabin pressure is pushing our ear membrane or eardrum, and it's pushing inward, and then we start pinching our nose. So our eardrum will come back out to normal position. If you push it a little hard, it kind of goes like that. And if you overdo it, you could rupture your ear. And the same could be if the pressure is, going the opposite way, and it's going inward. It could do the same thing if it's not done right. Same like when going underwater, the pressure's pushing in on the eardrum. Um, but it's equal. You could go under a little, you go in a swimming pool, swim around, the pressure's going to be equal anywhere in that swimming pool, um, at a certain depth. And then if you go a little bit deeper down, it changes because the weight of the water, um, and and that's liquid, and of course you get wet. But with people say, "I'm pressurizing my home theater." Pressurizing what? What are you pressurizing? Most people wouldn't have a clue what they're pressurizing. If you check with sine wave tones, that otherwise anyone bragging about their home theater being pressurized with the bass with some rubbish movie, DC Marvel load of Atmos rubbish, that pressure is continuously changing. So it's not like a pressure in like a decompression chamber, and that pressure is equal, constantly equal. It's always varying on a movie or music soundtrack. It's going up and down. But if you want to play with sine wave tones and start with the lowest low frequency, that wavelength is longer than the room, but it fills the entire room. You can walk around practically with an SPL meter, and it only changes a tiny little bit, tiny little few dB. Um, you change and then play the next sine wave tones and the next and walk around again and measure it, and then you notice then gradually it's starting to change. Once you get into the 20 hertz range and start going a little bit up and up, that pressure range starts changing. It's like so it's 50 hertz gonna be continuously the same pressure at the front of in every corner of the room and mid walls, middle of the room. Is it gonna be the same pressure? No, it's gonna be up and down. It's gonna be completely random. So therefore, it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be, pressuring the room. If you design something that can uh, pressurize at 50 hertz and it's literally everywhere, multitudes of speakers specifically placed, um, and then just it's trial and error at the end of the day because every room is completely different. The walls, what's behind those walls, what's above the ceiling, what's below the floor, depending on what the floor is made of. Is it wooden floor? If it's wooden floor, then sound waves are going to pass through that and go down into the next room. Therefore, it's like having a space shuttle's flight deck pumped up with PSI, and suddenly one of the engineers noticed that the PSI is dropping. It's not going up to the correct because there is leakage, and that pressure is going elsewhere. It's venting. So yeah, you're gonna have a room that's pressurized, and because if you, it's easy to test this in a small in a room. It's easy to test this and put a speaker or certain type of speaker into an enclosure box or a special box and have microphones to monitor the sound pressures of the frequency, and then um, you purposely then have an opening where you you open it like a little tiny little vent, and then you'll see that there will be a change in that frequency pressure within that box. So you got a speaker in a box. So you got like say a clear transparent box. So you can see the speaker in the box, and you got microphones placed inside it, and then you've got a little vent, and then you open it, and then you'll see a slight dB reduction in the pressure, and then you have other vents, and then you open those randomly, and then you'll start seeing the pressure dropping in theoretical theory. Um, so there's windows in a room maybe, and those windows they're not strong. They're very weak. They're pretty weak links. The glass on windows is only roughly average homes. It's only about that thick. So sound is going to leak through that base. Well, sound waves are going to pass through it depending on what SPL level you're playing at. Oh, and another thing about all this room EQ treatment is people talk about soundproofing. Soundproofing and treating a room are two different things. You can make a room within a room. Thus, firstly, you got to measure the room for about a week with RTA, noise criteria, or NC rating for a whole week to see what traffic sounds and all that. And then you got a data file. Then you start building a room within a room. You can go to the junkyard and get some suspension springs, get an angle grinder, cut them, make a floating floor, very cheap, so the room will float, so, you know, on a kind of suspension, and you build a room within a room, providing the room in the first place is very large. Otherwise, it's completely pointless for a small room. Otherwise, it's only good for voice recording, like ADR, automated dialogue replacement recording. So you've got no other sound interference that can get in onto that microphone. Um, and materials for a room within a room are they're not expensive. Crikey, they're about as common as mud on eBay. You can buy the like you could use MDF, you could use a combination of plywood, plasterboard, and you build it in such a way there's plenty of information on the internet to show how to build a room within a room. And then basically the room within a room has got to play with a certain SPL level in mind. So if you want to play at stupid sound pressure levels, that room within a room, when measured on the outside with microphones, it's not. It's got to be hardly noticeable. So that just means you got to build the thickness of and the where the treatment of the materials are applied and other materials that go in between the cavities and such to dampen down or break up certain frequencies and minimize it. So when tested on the outside, it's like you can't even hear it. Um, so you know it works, but you don't have to necessarily play it at stupid sound pressure levels. Anything over 100, anything when it starts going over a certain SPL level is asking for you're asking for tinnitus, which is not a joy. There's no joy in tinnitus. Um, you can't replace the components in our ears, and you just hear this continuous noise in your ears, just like an amplifier that's been overdriven, and then the capacitors get damaged, and then they start making random frequency noises, and you just replace the capacitor, and then the amplifier sounds okay again. Um, or the audio device, uh, whichever, processor audio device, and then it sounds okay again. Um, the EQ really. So if you want to EQ speakers with all this dirac, this Odyssey, this Genesis nonsense, it's not impossible to use a mixing console. I brought myself a mixing console that you can buy relatively cheap on eBay, mixing desks, and usually they have up to 24 or maybe more, XLR inputs for microphones, where it's providing phantom power, and use a bit of the ingenuity, a little bit of a savvy, you could place microphones pretty close to loudspeakers within a room because the rack or the whatever, it's always a single microphone placed in one position in the room. If that room was ideal, totally ideal, you really shouldn't have to move that. Well, moving that microphone from one seat to the next, that's like someone in your room talking, and it's like suddenly you say, I don't like the sound of your voice. I need to equalise it." Or you "Here, put a sock in your mouth," or "Put this in your mouth," and it changes the sound or modulation tone of the frequency of the voice. And then you think, "Oh, well, I like that now. That sounds good." Why some people sometimes say, "I don't like the sound of my own voice," because when you record it and play it back, there are a few things that are missing. Though the microphone is picking it up, and it's the actual frequency response on the playback. Um, I mean, you know it's your voice, but there's something there. It's saying, "I don't like the sound of my voice," because there is a small little few details that are missing, but they are there. They're just not being applied very well in the playback reproduction. Um, or the loudspeaker is incorrectly applying, or the room with the loudspeaker within the room is applying something additional there that you know it's psychoacoustics. It's testing and testing and testing and testing and testing and testing and testing until it's like you've solved it and think, right, that sounds more natural now. And that's the recording of the voice and the loudspeaker adjustment slightly, uh, and whatever else. Because we hear in cavity sound in our head. We hear it in our, we can hear or feel it in our chest when we talk. And those are some of the details that are missing in the sound recording. You could put your hand on a speaker diaphragm, and then you can feel like I can feel myself talking there. And if I were to put my hand on a speaker cone and think, oh yeah, I'm getting a similar and a sort of psychoacoustic. You see, the way I think is a little bit more different than all the other people on YouTube, where they're just getting paid to say these things, and the manufacturers say, "Oh, jolly well done, good. Here, here's $100 in the mail." Um, I prefer a little bit more accurate science, and there's quite a few where I don't know, it just oh, I don't know either they're very terrible at conveying the information, giving the information, and most don't have test equipment. I at first, I didn't have test equipment, and I was extremely frustrated and reading forums that seemed like there's some industrial insider on the other end, and they're BSing. It's like they got just a little bit of money, a clout, and it's like, oh crikey, if you start going against them, and then they're because they probably paid off some of the forum owner or the moderators. I don't know. And you just can't trust it. But um, I guarantee if you put microphones very near to speaker components, um, you could use a multitude of, so if you got a three-way speaker, typically you're going to have to put microphones near the bass port, the reflex port, a microphone directly near to the bass driver, one near directly to the mid range, and one near directly to the tweeter. And the microphones have got to all be balanced carefully, and multitudes of those microphones set up so you don't have to move microphones around. So once you start doing the frequency sweep check testing, um, it'll look at how what the frequency response looks, and then you got to look at it, and it's all like, yeah, and you think, well, that needs to be EQ or corrected with the filters to correct the unevenness in um, in the frequency range. Also, it could be you could do it independently. So you do the bass driver on its own, mid range on its own, the tweeter on its own. So the microphones will be won't be they'll be turned off for the bass mid, and it'll just monitor the tweeter, that microphone. It'll take a frequency response reading from those tweeters, and then you look at all the other um, tweeters for the surround speakers, or rather the tweeters used for the surround channel. Um, because they should all be similar. Because if you measure pink noise electronically, or whilst it's going around, cycling around left, center, right surround on headphones, it sounds the same, doesn't change. There's another thing to do where you can have a continuous multi signal where it plays on all channels. And you could, if you just slightly change or alter the phase or the polarity or frequency on one of those channels, you would hear it. You would hear a slight thing. Oh, it doesn't sound the same now. Something's been changed. Because soundtracks are typically mixed within a very tight dB tolerance of few dB. Uh, and the playback should be more or less the same. There's so many ways to do the EQ checking. One is checking electronically first to make sure everything is all got the same overlay, so they all got a perfect frequency response on the overlays. Checking it electronically, and then when you check the loudspeakers, then you think, crikey, they're not even near or close. Their frequency response is way off by many dB. Um, and so you got a line, you got something there that says, okay, that's a target curve. Now you got to get that frequency range on these speakers to match that amplifier curve. Um, but if you haven't got enough filters, or if the EQ device hasn't got enough filters, PEQ filters, because you should really be applying very narrow band filters at the very high frequencies. And then as you come down, or actually, really, you should be narrow filters, because the sine wave tone sweep is going bit by bit by bit very fast. Or you could do it, or you can sign it on the. I think you can on the Room EQ Wizard to do a very slow sweep. But you don't want to do a slow sweep in a room, otherwise, any noise that's happening in the room that's going to get picked up on the microphone, and it's going to fudge the frequency response reading. So it's got to be done fast. Um, the, res- the response on it's pointless because there's so many things in a room that are gonna alter that frequency, and you can't change it unless you wanna start throwing things out of the room or take the system outdoors and then put a projection screen up outside and play it on loudspeakers outside, um, in a quiet, um, surrounding, so it will never be that quiet because, um, doesn't matter about, um, neighborhood or street traffic or anything, even if it's quiet out in the desert, anything that's in nature itself that's gonna be wind breeze, very gentle, that's gonna be a noise floor issue. So, there goes your noise floor. Um, but it would sound way better than an actual room. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, music, films, they're mixed within rooms because they know that ideally that, an auditorium could be, reasonably quiet, but also, maybe a little bit dreadful with, typically, cinemas, they have this even though they got treatment, all around the walls, and there's sometimes a little bit treatment that's missing or different near to the front of the auditorium, and of course the ceiling, itself doesn't use the same material as the walls, it's using something different, and it's always typically got a certain sound, an auditorium's always got this certain typical sound, which sounds absolutely dreadful because if you listen to that same soundtrack on headphones that's playing in an auditorium, it's the total opposite. It's like, "Oh, I'm not hearing that honky sound anymore on the headphones," you know? It's always got this honky sound. That's why I don't hear it in my room because the walls, the ceiling have all got the same wedged foam tiles, carpet tile on the floor, and I don't hear that honky sound that I typically hear at a cinema, um, or a cinema the where it's basically bare walls with just materials applied just to lower reverberation slightly, but it doesn't do anything for the echo. You just hear this the moment, um, we hear we hear typical voice, conversation, dialogue, and depending on the stupidity of the movie, if it's Michael Bay rubbish, then it's gonna have dialogue talking so fast, so rapid, and nobody talks like that, uh, unless they're politicians. And then the conversation becomes gibberish. The movie becomes a load of trash, a load of rubbish. You can't understand what's being said. And then when you read the actual script itself, what's being said on film, and it's like, oh, is that what? And you think, crikey, who talks like this? You just can't understand it. And I've had that listening experience with some films, and I think this movie's dreadful. And if it was another movie, it's still got the same echo sort of issue, but the dialogue is not. It's not being spoken like it's like someone typing, like a secretary typing really fast, so many words per second, and that's how these stupid Michael Bay movies sound. It's like, bloody hell, how do you get these actors to start talking like that? you know, really. And then it sounds like an echo chamber because it doesn't give pause or breathing room to understand the dialogue. It just becomes gibberish. I've heard that. I mean, I sometimes hear that on the CB radio where people are using echo microphones, and I think, "Oh my goodness, it's not necessary to use an echo microphone." You know, it's a gimmick, and you're only listening in mono on a radio. It's not going to add any great effect. Um, Providing, of course, you've got enough power to get through all the other noise and all the other transmission stations. Um, and mixing a movie and, and having loud music passages with dialogue passages that don't come through very clearly. And you think, I tell you, movies like Transformers, I can't stand those rubbish movies anymore. They're just a load of rubbish. The sound effects are rubbish. The music's rubbish. The dialogue is rubbish. The script, the whole thing is rubbish. I don't even play those Transformer movies anymore. Transformer, the first one, and Transformer Part 3 or Part 4, whatever it was, and that was it. That's the only Transformers I got, and I don't care for any other Transformer, whatever, 'cause it's just it's a franchise of dribble. I don't care how low the bass goes on it. And that's another thing that some that say that bass that we hear in our rooms is partly the room amplifying it slightly, and we may not be hearing a legitimate 20 hertz. Um, I hear or sense a pressure um, at 20 hertz in the room on the speakers. But is it truly legitimate? Now, there's several ways to check whether it is legit because 20, even listening on headphones, um, because the headphones have been so close. I haven't done a recent check test on headphones. One, I need a decent, blooming affordable preamplifier that can connect to the optical output on the Storm audio processor so I can listen to on the headphones. Otherwise, the current present one I have has a very low output and it's not sufficient enough. Um, because Storm audio, I've had the bright idea of not putting a headphone output on the processor, just whereas just about every other alien I've got has an headphone output. Really. Uh, yeah. So uh, I like to be true to things, whereas all the other YouTube channels they're just oh dear. I mean, I got test equipment. I mean, I can say like, does Shane Lee, Youth Man, do any of those guys have an oscilloscope in their home? The answer is no. If they had an oscilloscope, I would have saw it in a video. I've got plenty of videos where I show my oscilloscope 4 channel. I don't hardly use it all the time. It's in my kitchen. It's there But as and when I want to use that oscilloscope, which is cheap for a 4 channel digital, um, so I can monitor 4 signals at the same time and adjust the frequencies or the voltage levels accordingly to be all the same, rather than testing one thing at a time. I can test 4 things at once, um, just the same way as I can test multitude of speakers with a microphone up close to a loudspeaker, anywhere from 1 microphone up to 24 microphones. Most, not even Trinov can do that sort of thing. And those microphones for a Trinov, oh dear, I just don't understand that. They call it a three-dimensional microphone. The whole thing with three-dimensional immersive audio is also more misleading than the equalizer, the room EQ treatment. It's more misleading, and people believe in people like, I tell you what YouTube channels really get under my skin are like audio advice. Frankly, I think they are the worst advice. In some ways, their advice is okay sometimes, but nearly most of the time, their advice is total BS, especially when you get some guy smiling. And when someone's smiling all the time, you know that's total BS. Most people know this. Most people bite their tongue, don't want to bother leaving a comment. In fact, it's better to leave a comment to let them know that, hey, there's a lot of wise people out here, and we're on to you. This isn't fair to mislead the public. They're worse than politicians. Oh, dear. Because the audio industry is a crooked industry. Um, I think someone mentioned in a very long, um, detailed text conversation. I can't remember where this was, but it was a very, very thorough detail in how crooked this industry is. Because it's crooked. There are people left, right, and centre. They're all out to do some good things, but there are also people out there at the same time to do the other competition in, because they want to have all the glory at the end of the day. That's why there's so many competing different types of dirac, Genesis, Odyssey. My goodness, and all of them are a load of rubbish because they can't because their system doesn't cover 20,200 PEQ filters. That is my take. That is what I've looked at the whole thing and think, I can't EQ my system with this. I'll only be doing half of it, if not no, less than half. I want to start at 20,000 kilohertz and work backwards and then see how many PEQ filters or how much of this frequency response that I can correct with the microphone close to the speaker, and how much of it I can correct before I run out of filters. If I can manage and strive and think, "Whoa, that's about the best I can do," right, that's done the HF. Now I need the rest to do the low frequency, because there's gonna be all sorts of strange things popping up that in the natural world, when bass sounds are playing, or certain sounds, and we hear it in a we say, "Ah, this has got to be within the bass spectrum." What part of the bass spectrum? Is it very low down, or is it a little bit middle range? And versus that compared to a recording and then played over a loudspeaker, because it's very easy to do a recording of something and then play that recording back over the loudspeaker raw without doing any additional EQ or tweaking it. You just record it raw, but you got to record it without any other sound interruption. So you record it carefully without any other sound interruptions, and then you play that same sound back over your system on your speakers, and you've got to make a some sort of memory, got to memorize that the recording. So, you're going to record it with a camera phone. So it's only got two little. So when you're in the landscape position, it should be recording in stereo. Uh, or you can use outboard microphones or a digital recorder. Use two microphones or multiple microphones for the recording. Say a car engine, for example. So you open the bonnet, you've got multitudes of microphones around the car engine. Um, that's listening or looking down on the car engine because we can move around, but those microphones they can't move around as freely as we can. And so therefore, when we start moving, everything starts changing, tonal pressures, everything. Because a car engine is going to have a certain noise and it's going to have a certain detail, a sound to that engine, re- sound reflections and such. So we perceive that as we call it stereo. But those are just time arrivals of frequencies of and then you just get someone to rev it a little bit, and the recording's got to be done so that the recording doesn't clip or distort. Now you play that typically over an LCR in a room, it's not going to sound like the car engine. Period. One, the speakers are too far apart for the left and right, and you got the center, and you got the left and right. It's not going to sound the same. You got to have a new breed. So if the car engine width is typically maybe about a 4 or 5 feet across in width, and you measure it, and then you set up the loudspeakers, and it's like, what loudspeakers size do we use? You got to get some maybe 12-inch bass drivers with a HF horn, um, maybe 15, maybe 18 with a HF horn, and you set them up very closely put together with the sound recording that's going to play in a well, play it raw as a multi-stereo. Nearly that's not impossible to duplicate stereo, 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 and then just listen to it. So you got SPL readings of the car engine, you got Spectrum Lab, you got Room EQ Wizard, you got enough data to show the frequency characteristic of that engine where the microphones were, and you stand more or less in the same position. The speakers would have to be angled. Yeah, they got to be placed a little bit. They can't be facing forward because the car engine, unless you turn, unless of course you get something on that car and then you turn the car from horizontal to vertical. Otherwise, the engine is not going to be in the exact same sounding position. As if that makes any sense, because that's the way I think, and everyone else is like all these sound editors and re-recording it. when they mix a movie, and I'm thinking, "Nah, there's something missing." I can see where the camera work is and all that, but the sound reproduction, it doesn't match. So anyway, you got an angle basically, and then you play this back in a room. Does it sound like a bloody does it sound like a car engine? Does it sound horrendously bloody loud that you think, "Crying out loud, I want to turn it down?" Because car engine outside has got plenty of breathing room. There's no walls around it unless it's in a garage, it's gonna sound very echoey. Bloody earplugs in your ears, because it's gonna be very harsh. And, if you play it back inside, yeah. Although it's not impossible also to say, yeah, a motorbike in a room, 'cause a motorbike can easily probably just get through the door, and then put the handlebars back on, et cetera. Um, so you do a recording of a motorbike outside, and then you play that same recording back indoors with the motorbike. So you do A, B, C, D, whatever comparison. I think you're gonna find that the recording of a motorbike in some typical movies sometimes sound a bit more relaxing, than the actual bloody thing itself, where you're just gonna think, "What the bloody hell am I doing with a motorbike indoor?" It sounds horrendous. It's way too loud than it is when it's outside because, you got the ceiling, and so you're gonna get sound reflection. It's gonna get certain parts of that sound of that motorbike are gonna get a little bit amplified in certain frequency ranges. Um, yeah, yeah. Uh, Sometimes, I listen to a movie like The Terminator 2. So what? It's got a stupid Harley Davidson motorbike in the movie. It's only gets a little screen time now and then, and so what? Personally, I don't like the sound of motorbikes. I think they sound absolutely horrible. Um, it's okay to have a vehicle that's got speed to go from A to B, but really, is it necessary to make it that loud? Really? Because it just it then makes the object, to me, it just makes it unappealing. I mean, wouldn't it be okay to make a space shuttle sound a little bit more quieter? Because I'm sure it really drives wildlife away from the surrounding area, or does damage to their hearing range, because those things are horrendously bloody loud, and you can't control it, even though it's moving away, pulling away rapidly. So it's not going to last that long, but that's neither here or there. Um, Sometimes I hear a load of motorbikes going around this area, and sometimes I think they're purposely doing that on purpose, revving it at horrendous levels, and it pisses me off, and I'm sure it's pissing off a lot of animals around the area. That's just scaring the wits out of them, and, yeah. Um, Another thing that is difficult, it's like you do a recording of a you do an actual recording of yourself and then play it back, so you're yelling or shouting, measure the frequency and all that, everything, and then you get, and then play it back. So the amplifier's gotta be capable without clipping or distortion, harmonic frequencies, etc. Of course, you'd be monitoring that on the actual recording with enough data, because if I were to make a sound like ah, ooh, whoa, make random sounds, they'll appear on the RTA and show me the frequencies. Can I repeat that? Repeatedly repeat all that over and over? Um, Kinda close, kinda close, but it will vary, so it's not gonna be a mirror image. So once you do a sound, you record, you think, "Okay, uh, try to get rehearse it to play back over and over so you get near enough." Uh, Loud dialogue, like how many people listen to Tom Cruise ranting in Born on the 4th of July, where he comes back as, the character he's playing, comes back home drunk, and he's how many people can remember that movie played back in a cinema on, you know, JBL speakers or maybe, Voice of the Theatre or Electro Voice, EV speakers. Those are typically some of the speakers that I've heard the movie on. Um, Sounded pretty impressive on the EV speakers. The other speakers at the cinema were slightly dated from the 1960s. It sounded okay. It sounded realistically loud, but not harsh. Um, and it's doing, say, like a recording and monitoring the frequency response. So you've got multitude of microphones to monitor your voice on the RTA. And you can see what frequency response curve it's producing. And then you look at the recording. So then you play back the recording over the loudspeaker. And does it match? Or is that there are some parts of the components of that speaker that are slightly raising some of the frequency, and then we hear it and it sounds a bit harsh. Um, hmm. Engineers are aware of all this and mixing, and they take great measures of lengths to get good recording. Uh, so it sound harsh. Uh, Sometimes they add or apply EQ boosting, and some films I notice it and I think, gosh, that bit of passage of dialogue there sounds a little harsh, and I can see the frequency range it's doing, and then I think, okay, maybe I'll try and vocalize the same word, the same dialogue, and look at it on the RTA. But what I can't mimic is the actual voice of a female. Maybe if I pinch my nose, if we pinch our nose, it changes the sound. Wah, changes the tone slightly. Um, or I can do a recording and I'd have to manipulate the sound mix slightly by changing the pitch of the speed because the sound of male voice goes down lower, the sound of female is a little higher pitched. So I've got to kind of, you know, modulate the frequency speed of the sound and change its speed until I see a similar, you know, That's why when you that's why sometimes most people would prefer buying a Region 1 DVD over a Region 2, or an NTSC Laserdisc over a PAL Laserdisc, because they use a speed up where they're speeding the content up a little. It's totally unnecessary, really. They can play it back at a slower, a slower frame rate, so you can have the same sound that's on NTSC and have it on PAL Laserdisc without the speed up, really. Um, I've just bought myself another version of Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, which I only have on Region 2 DVD, and I brought a Region 1 DVD, first issue pressing, because all the other pressings that have come out over the years, Blu-ray, 4K, they are absolutely appalling. What they've done to the actual sound mix itself is absolutely is terrible. It doesn't sound anything like the actual release. About the only one that sounds near is the first edition DVD. It's not even 16:9 picture encoded, but you can still zoom it up to fill the frame area, so it's not a problem. But at least it has the same sound mix that I heard on 70 millimeter. Um, at least I think close. I heard the dialogue panning in the same positions. What they've done on the 7.1 mix is, is absolutely terrible. Whoever that engineer is shouldn't even be near a mixing console, much less a dub stage. Um, oh, okay, open the EQ bay doors, Hal. I'm afraid I can't do that. What are you talking about, Hal? I know you're planning to deactivate bypass my EQ, and I'm afraid I can't allow that to happen. I don't know what you're talking about, Hal. Open the EQ door base, Hal. This conversation serves no more purpose. Goodbye. Hal? Hal? Yeah, see, these EQs is like, the Odyssey. Like 2001, A Space Odyssey. Um, oh dear. Like I say, if you want to EQ the speakers and all that, do it up close. Get yourself a mixing console, enough microphones. You need a lot, mind you. There's a bit of trouble. You could place maybe a single microphone. It's possible to place it maybe about less than 1 meter away from the speaker. So it's positioned in a certain position. So it's going to pick up the high frequency, the mid range, the bass driver, and the port as well, because that's also part of the speaker, unless, of course, it's sealed. Um, you could run it differently, and then the auto should correct it. The other thing to check is also the microphone's got to be checked as well. So it's a long process. Pink noise. I'll check all the microphones with a single speaker with pink noise and a validate with also the frequency sweep as well. Yes, yes, frequency sweep to see which microphones are slightly differ. Um, and if they marginal, there'd be a EQ filters on the mixing console where you could apply a little high frequency where you can slightly just minor correct the fault on the microphone. And then once everything's all checked, then those microphones can be placed around the room near to the speakers, run the frequency Odyssey, the rack, the Genesis, whatever. And then once it's all done, then play it back and listen to it and think, judge it to see whether that makes a difference. Or you can switch it. Of course, you can switch it on, off, but you can't just really switch it all on and off. You got to go into the system itself to, to switch it on, off, play back the same content over and over and over to see if it makes an impacting difference. Um, does it make it sound more? Does it make the high frequencies? Can you hear a little bit more detail on the soundtrack, or other specific sound effects? Can you hear can you hear it a little bit more clearer, or would it sound the same? Usually, like say like the piece of string, you know, um, it's easier to put this on a flat surface than but maybe say, you got some part of the frequency range here, and you got a big dip in the response, and you think, "Gosh, golly, how can you fix that until it's like that?" There's something going on in the room. You can't EQ it. It it's something that you shouldn't even attempt. Though we do like to attempt, but the results are usually not very good. If you got a suck out in a certain low frequency, oh yeah, I don't know what I did earlier, but mm, if you got a suck out of a certain frequency, a suck out, I wouldn't say a suck out. I would say it's something in the room where the sound is going around the room so fast. 'Cause the moment you play a sine wave tone or pink noise, it instantly goes everywhere in the room. And there's usually some point somewhere in the room where it's something to do with the walls, and it's actually applying its own EQ to that speaker frequency response to where that speaker is specifically located, or specific speakers are located. Other parts of the room, that frequency response might, the same speaker, it might look okay. Another part in the room, it's like, oh, there's something going on because there is something within the room that's changing, altering its frequency. And room EQ treatment, no, it's not treatment. You've got to actually treat the room itself physically to get that dip in that frequency response to go from down here and come up here. And then it's fully restored. And then you can, yeah, I noticed the bass kick and all that, blah, 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 because it's been restored back to normal, but it's still within a room. where it's getting slightly amplified by the room itself. Um, I'm just trying to find another way around this, and we'll find another thing that's similar to. Um, Not sure if radio RF applies. Uh, Possibly have a room with an antenna inside, and then you purposely put materials on the walls, ceiling, floor, um, to disrupt the uh, RF output. Uh, that's easy to test. You don't need a nearby radio station. You can have another antenna outside with another radio inside. So you've got multiple radios, and you transmit, and then look at the signal, and then take all the material down, and then transmit again to see if there's any difference in the signal strength. Um, hmm. I'm thinking tin foil. So you put layers of tin foil all around the room and see how much difference it's going to change the signal by. It's typically you could put a CB, a CB or a radio transmitter, CB aerial indoor, a small aerial, but the signal getting out, still getting outside, out to other stations would be very weak compared to when it's outdoors and it's placed up in a good position where the signal can, yeah, transmit, because the signal can go kind of, you know, yeah, but really it goes up into the ionosphere and then comes back down. Comes back down. Uh, oh gosh, that's a weird question. Yeah, clear. Yeah, clear. I think it's where I blew my nose earlier. Mm, mm. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, dirac, dirac live. I don't even use it. I don't even use it on my system. I can't use it because the way I designed my system with what's called the B chain, is more complex than most other people's home theatre, including all the millionaire home theatres that are around. It's way too complicated, and if I try to attempt to use EQ, when it passes through the B chain and to certain additional outboard matrix decodering, it's gonna mess up the signal, so I can't use the EQ. I could use outboard EQ after those matrix decoders, but that's how it's usually done in cinema decoding. The signal goes into the optical soundtrack preamplifier, or no, actually, it goes firstly from the film onto the sound head. The sound head picks up the sound signals through light, and then that light there changes the little wiggly lines on the film into electrical impulse signals. That gets transferred over to the a little preamplifier in the projector. It gets transferred over to the cinema processor's preamplifier, and then it passes then through to the noise reduction, and then it passes through to the matrix decoder and a few other circuitry processor cards on the processor uh, until it finally passes over to the oh yeah, also the equalizers because it goes through to the matrix decoder and passes over to, then it's handed over to the equalizers because the equalizer's job is to, they call it house curve or house EQ back on those processors on the EQ cards. Today they call it room EQ, room treatment. So it's still the same thing. But the problem with the Dolby EQs back in their day, they were only third octaves, so they're not going to cover many frequency bands. You got to measure it in third octave resolution. Um, but if you look at it in 1/48th octave, and you can see how the band frequencies are still like, oh gosh, there's still problematic things that need to be solved, and there's just not enough EQ filters on those cards because they only typically add about 27 filters. Um, Now they say they got somewhere in the order of 600 filters or something a little bit more than that, but it's still not enough. Got to have at least 20,000 for every single channel, and then you can get cracking on that, getting that speaker to sound a little bit better, and also checking the frequency, doing the frequency sweep tests up close with the microphone to see if those tweeters are all look similar-ish, but they won't overlap. They aren't going to overlay by any means. They're going to be a little bit out position in some parts, and that's because of the way the diaphragm was probably glued to the magnet, uh, or it could be a defect on the diaphragm, or maybe a minor defect on the magnet. So you got, otherwise you do a frequency sweep over and over and over on an amplifier. Usually they come up almost similar. Some cases there might be a few dB drop, but that's easy to compensate, to adjust until it overlays. That's easy. That's not rocket science, but it is a bit of rocket science when it comes to EQing the speaker and getting it absolutely spot on so it looks exactly identical to the other tweeter and the next tweeter and the next and the next and so on. And though those tweeters are going to be in for the front LCRs, the surround speakers, though they're going to be in different positions in the room, um, where to where you're sat in the seat. And we don't sit still all the time. We move around in the seat, so it's always going to continuously change, just as real life sound would change with certain sounds. And you move, and if a sound in real life world is continuous. It's always making and you move around slightly, you can hear the pressure changing. Yeah, the tone changing and the frequency. Um, there are some people that are way, way beyond too purist and think they want it to be so if you move around in the room, it doesn't change too much. Um, I mean, with all this people that are so religious about uh, Atmos. I mean, what is Atmos? Is that is that the whole system itself, or is it just the overhead speakers? And they are just speakers that are just used for overhead. They're not Atmos speakers. Yet still, you got all these YouTubers still calling these speakers Atmos speakers and saying, and this Atmos speaker is designed with 4 or 6 drivers, and it gives immersive detail. Oh, God, what a load of BS. Yeah, right, sure it does. That's why it still sounds like a hotspot on the ceiling, huh? Um, and if you got a room that's like one of these a cathedral room where it's got a high pitched ceiling, where I've seen a picture of where someone's got a very high pitched ceiling. It's a little bit flat at the top, but his speakers are way, way, way too high. Plus, they're a little bit too narrow. So any left or right sound that he's going to try and hear is not going to be very detailed. It's going to be a bit diffused. Um, because the further away you put speakers, that's stereo 2 channel, depending on their width. The further away you put those, that they'll just end up sounding like a mono-ish sound. So you're not going to get any, you know, good detail there. So the closer or the where the specifically where they're placed, um, and then you can just notice detail going from that side to that side, or phantom sound. Or in my room, I get pinpoint sound because I use a matrix decoders connected to the overheads, so I get pinpoint sound locations. If it's where most times on some Atmos overhead mixing, sometimes I hear it like, oh, it sounds mono. Oh, so it's a phantom sound signal. It's mixed on those 2 speakers, dual dual sound. There's no stereo. There's nothing to give it any, realism. Sounds mono-ish in this day and age. That's diabolical. Um, um, oh, what's my kitty up to? He's up to no good. You're up to no good. Are you being fed? I fed you. My cat's looking for attention. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna. Now, Magic Cat is breaking things, looking for attention. Cats are very clever creatures. They are. They are very clever creatures. And they don't get what they want. They will go through whatever measures to get those demands. You can't negotiate basically, what I'm just saying is all these EQers, all these manufacturers, there are a lot of bullshitters. They like bullshit in their product, and you get all the paid skills like audio advice, audioholics, and Shamely, and oh crikey, and a few other characters as well that like BSing because they just want to. They're just desperate for a check in the mail, for crying out. Me? Am I desperate for a check in the mail? I couldn't care for. I couldn't give a hoot. So I know all these EQ, these so-called claim on their EQ room treatment is bullshit. Otherwise, I look at dirac and their webinars sometimes, and I'm thinking I have not even seen one single lengthy live video where someone is doing the EQ in the room. I'll tell you, I saw one video. I think it's related to dirac EQ, and it was laughable because the guy in the video, and I think the comments on the video are turned off, and it's laughable. He's got a typical microphone that looks like like a Behringer ECM 8000. It's that similar design, right? And he's showing how he's doing the EQ, and he's got little video slides where before and after. But what's funny is the microphone is not even connected to an XLR. It's got no lead connected to it. So he's moving this microphone around, and I'm thinking, wait a second, where's the microphone cable? Where's the XLR cable? Oh, it must be a wireless microphone then. Ah, yeah, right, sure it is. I can't remember what video that was. So I'm pretty sure it was the rat. They show all this before and after bullshit. I saw another video where there's no point. I mean, there's no harm. There's no harm in trying it or doing it. But when you put a microphone so you've got the back of the seat, and you got the microphone about this ear position sort of thing. You got a seat that's a little bit too high up, and what the problem is there is the microphone's going to pick up the sound reflection from that seat, and then it's going to get picked up on the mic. They call it a crest factor. Basically, it's just a sound reflection. Because if you raise the microphone a little bit higher up and measure it in pink noise, then you see the frequency response changes slightly. Basically, the whole thing with the seating is going to change the EQ. The way that seat is designed is going to change everything. So there is no EQ room treatment, Neo. It's total bullshit. I'm sorry, Neo, but they've been bullshitting you. No, it's not true. I want out of there. So they can turn us consumers into brainless bloody sheep. People like Audioholics, Gene, he wouldn't have the nerve to start going against it. And I've got the nerve. I don't really give a damn. I know it's bullshit. I know it's just an EQ that should be used to correct the bloody loudspeaker. It's not to correct the bloody room, for crying out loud. Otherwise, you would have to have something as complex like you got to have you got to do the EQ up close to the speakers first to correct those speakers' frequency response from not looking like a bloody roller coaster ride to making it look almost as similar to the frequency response of that amplifier. And that is not impossible to do. And then you need, after that, all has been corrected, then you need a secondary EQ. Yeah, maybe placed around the seating, but it's only going to put multiple microphones around the seats and get an average. And you think, that's about as good as it's going to be. Nothing more can be done. Oh, yeah, and change the frequency response again, but not actually changing the actual frequency response on the first stage EQ that's done the speaker up close. Use a secondary EQ, even though that EQ on the first stage is going to get, but you don't want to mess around with it. Once it's done, it's done. Then you use a secondary to make minor adjustments and check around the seating to see how much it is varying by. You don't want it go too far out of place, out of position. You want it within a very tiny dB tolerance. Otherwise, it's going to, be noticeable. And that is best you can do. And you need a third stage EQ. Third stage would be used for maybe correcting the EQ of specific film soundtracks or music, because some sound mixes within our rooms may sound a little, well, that sounds a little bit harsh and unnatural. You know, I don't care what it sounds like when it was mixed on a dub stage, because one, we don't have the same room as a dub stage, we don't have the same speakers that they have on a dub. In fact, the whole damn equipment. Basically, the sound mix, they're compensating for X curve, and it might sound a little harsh. It might sound okay. Music mixes, usually they're typically mixed without no X curve. Where films have an X curve, music is mixed flat response. That's why when you listen to a CD album or a vinyl, whatever, of a soundtrack, we hear the soundtrack of the music record, the music score. When you hear that on the film, say the same piece of music uh, for the opening titles or end credits, it is slightly different in the frequency response. It sounds like the same music, but except it's slightly different in the frequency response. Um, and so you need that many stage EQ, especially an EQ that's got, yeah, that would have to be like a powerhouse EQ system. Have to be an outboard that can connect to any processor whatsoever without compromise. Otherwise, all this rubbish that they're throwing at us today. Have you ever figured that, like, it's all built into the processor? You can't say like, "Well, I don't like dirac on my Storm audio. I want Odyssey." You can't trade it in now, can you? Say, or if the processors were all that brilliant, and it's like, well, I want to download the Odyssey onto the Storm audio. That should be user consumer um, friendly or option. You know, if I wanted to use Odyssey on you know, I just buy a load of cheap Onkyo AVR, connect them up in such a way, and then I can use the Odyssey on my system in the room. I wouldn't have to use the dirac. So, but that means the processors, the AVRs, they're about 5 U typically. They're about 5 U frame high. Um, yeah, it's going to be very tatty, very messy, but not impossible. Um, this whole bullshit of this EQ home marketing thing, it needs to stop. All this bullshit about it is room correction. That nonsense needs to stop because legally you could take that to the high end courts and say, with a claim that this is not a room treatment thing. An actual room treatment is actually applying materials to the walls. Because if I was to put a speaker, um, if I would have put a speaker near a wall and a microphone in between it, did a frequency response, I would see a frequency response. Okay, I'll see a curvature on the graph, and then next I purposely apply something to the wall, and then run that frequency response sweep again. It's going to be different because there has been something applied physically to the wall. Therefore, it changes. It changes. It'll either enhance certain frequency or it would because make it dip down slightly because some frequencies we find to sound a little bit harsh. Typically, sometimes if I find something harsh, I just put a band pass filter across the left, center, right. Um, if it's going to be a movie that's going to play typical music in certain ranges, and it sounds a little harsh, a bit tinny sounding or toppy, and I'll just put a filter at a certain frequency range and then widen the cue bandwidth out and then cut the frequency down or cut the gain level down so that it sounds less harsh. And then it makes the rest of the soundtrack more bold and fuller. And because our hearing range is more sensitive to high frequency, I turn off the HF horns. All I hear is the bass muffled sound, depending on what crossover frequency I'm using. Or I can change the HF horn frequency response and adjust it so it plays only from 4 kilohertz upward. It's going to sound very sort of like that, and then change it a little bit more up to maybe 8 kilohertz. It's going to be more like that. Um, hmm, so many things you could do with a DSP crossover that you can't really do very well with an active crossover. But then you got active versus DSP. They're two different things. You might you might not get too many artifacts with active crossover, whereas with DSP, um, it needs quite a lot of memory on its CPU, um, so it doesn't produce any um, very strange digital artifact noises that can easily be measured with sine wave tone. Is there any weird signals? So you've got the fundamental frequency playing, and then are there any other strange frequencies in front of it or maybe behind it? Is there anything strange going. If there is, then it's gonna be, well, is it audible? Can you hear it? Depending on our frequency hearing range. If we can, then, oh, then it's audible, and then they think there's something weird going on, you know? If there is someone out there that's gonna put dirac in the extinct dinosaur category, because unless dirac get real, I don't want to touch their product with a barge pole. And their product has got to be an outboard device so it can be applied to anything else. Otherwise, they're just partners with bloody Storm or whatever else out there. They're just partners for partners. It needs to be a separate outboard, 32 channel, which is quite a lot of channels for a flipping system. Come on, think about it. Um, XLR 32 channel, or can have um, DB25 connectors on it, depending, or RCA phono. So it's got to be universal. Uh, I suppose you could have this thing called Dante. Dante, I think it's called. The thing is, that Dante thing seems to be aimed for the snobby rich people. It's too damn expensive. It needs to be cheaper, so they sell like hotcakes. You can't make something that's too expensive and they're going to sell very few units. That's simple as that. It's like bloody selling garbage food KFC at $1,000 for a bloody chicken and basket mega meal. No one's going to pay that stupid price, and KFC will go out of business. They won't sell like hotcakes. You got to make a market for this bullshit for the home theater and audio market with all this high-end end game. Anyone that keeps saying, "Oh, I've got an end game process, end game speakers," you have not got end game speakers. End game bloody that sounds like it's bigger than the bloody universe itself. Bullshit. That's just ego words of bullshit. Otherwise, all right, if it's end game, yeah. Can it play the sound of an explosion? No, because you haven't even got that recording on the bloody film mix. Dynamic range will only go so far, and you can't reproduce. And no, it's not gonna do the same like a bloody, let's say a firework, bang, that's gonna be, oh, I don't know how many dB, it's gonna be well over. It would damage your hearing, and what's the stupidity, and what would be the stupidity of that then, huh? Just to damage your hearing. Bloody endgame speakers, endgame system. Oh, and luxury. It is not a luxury. Crikey, they're trying to sell this bloody high-end bloody so-called EQ like it's luxury. Most rich people wouldn't even know that. Oh, they don't really care too much. They just want a system just so they can show off to their rich snobby friends. "Oh, I got a home theater," and it doesn't even look anything like a commercial cinema. I saw one video and it doesn't even it Doesn't even have real cinema seating in it, for crying out loud, and it's got the same rubbish that I've got in my room. It's got the same rubbish, not the exact same make or model, but it's got the same rubbish typical processors that they make now. Trinov, JBL, Emativa or whatever, or Stormor, those processors are so slow. When you got to do video mode switching, it takes many seconds for the signal to get a lock on the video and the audio. With actual cinema in its day, real cinema that is, not the rubbish cinema that is around today. Even the rubbish cinema today, these digital cinema package rubbish, it's got a laggy time delay switching from one thing to the next. I can see it with the stupid video projectors they've got. There's no one in that room. It's all automated. I turn around, I'm looking back at the same bloody projection room that I once bloody did 35 mil projection in back in the 90 late 80 no 89 through 1990. Um, and I'm thinking, "Crikey, when I showed a film back then or other projectionists they showed, it was almost seamless." You know what? When the film is changing, through the film gate and you gotta do, um aperture plate, lens changeover, masking, sound muting, dowser, light projection, light. Oh, crikey. You gotta do so many things. You gotta rehearse it. You gotta learn it and rehearse it and do it over and over and over until you get very, very quick at it. And you gotta perform all that in just a matter of a few seconds. Otherwise, you can't take a coffee break. Otherwise, the audience are looking at a blank screen then, there's nothing going on. They're in darkness and they think, "What's going on?" Um, Today, oh dear. Oh, I don't really care. I don't really care. I've been there, I've done that. I'm retired now, so yeah. I think the quick I've had one AVR one time, I think that was pretty quick. It didn't have too much lag time delay. It still had a little delay, but it is not as bad as the Storm Audio. Crikey, I mean, I've seen a snail go faster than that, and so many buttons you've got to press just to get over to another video mode. Oh, I can use the remote, but the remote control is so stupid. It's poorly designed. The whole processor, because they don't expect the processor to be next to my cinema seating, where I could just reach out and touch a touch screen. Had they designed that into the processor with a touch screen, I could just press a button, touch the touch the screen, and should instantly go to that. Because if it's a so-called high-end processor, then it should be very high-end at video mode switching. It should be the moment I press it, it's there in literally 1 second, not waiting 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7 oh, bloody hell. I might as well paint the bloody processor and just watch the bloody paint dry on it. That is not a these processors they make for the home market, they are not. And for Marantz to dare call their range cinema whatever, Marantz Cinema, really, that takes the mickey. It's just another marketing name stuck on the damn thing just so people will buy and think it's got high-end grade quality. But most people you home theatre people, you wouldn't know how long it takes. You haven't worked in cinema projection. You don't know what it what it takes. And all I'm saying that these manufacturers, they could have designed and built a better processor to respond to similar to how actual cinema ones do back in the day. Oh dear. That's why I got various processes in my rack on my B chain. That's why my B chain is very complicated. Sometimes I even forget because if I've not used the cinema processor in the B chain for many months, I think, oh crikey, you know, it's like if I want to listen to turntable on my Technics, that is connected. My Technics turntable is connected to the onto the onto the Denon on the phono input, the phone, the turntable, it's for the preamp, and then the output is going output through the zone one or zone two output, and then that connects down to the crikey, I can't. Where's that connect onto? I can't remember if it connects onto the. Um, it doesn't connect to my Dolby CP200. I think it connects to my Dolby CP 750, and then it from that it's handed over to the Sony SDDS, I think, and then from the SDDS it's handed over then to the Storm Audio through the RCA 8-channel inputs. Um, Otherwise, I could um, connect the output from the zone output from the Denon over to the Storm Audio, and because at the moment I'm only using how many inputs? No, I'm using 8 inputs on the Storm Audio RCA phono. So if I use auxiliary inputs, I use the yeah. So yeah. Oh, there, there's not enough inputs on that Storm Audio, and the same goes for a stupid Trinov. You got to buy additional outboard converters where it would convert the RCA signal and then it will convert it into the HDMI signal, and then you plug it into the HDMI port. And that's going to cost hundreds. You're not going to find something that's going to be Amazon affordable, less than 100. That's going to be kind of okay on the specification. Otherwise, you're paying stupid hundreds just to crying out loud. They only had to put, that on the processor, but they're not thinking, are they? They're thinking everyone's likes playing this digital crap through HDMI bloody ports on their bloody processors now. Manufacturers are so sorely wrong about that. There's also not enough optical inputs, but then it's easy. Again, you buy an outboard optical input, so you can plug a multitude of optical inputs, and then you plug one output back into that processor. But you've got maybe 16 or 20 optical inputs, depending on how many devices you've got in the home that you like to use optical. There are still some people that like to use optical inputs, myself included. particularly with all the laserdisc players, with the content that I could play theatrical mixes back. None of this near field rubbish. It's very hard to determine which is near field and which is a theatrical mix, unless you've got um, other source material where you could do an A, B, C, D, E, F comparison testing. And then you can say, yeah, I think this one has been spared the near field. Or you get to another version and it's like, oh my goodness, this one is definitely near field because whatever else has been done to the sound mix is absolutely atrocious. And the dynamic range doesn't seem to have any, you know, loudness in the jump in the dialogue, or like Disney titles mostly. Bloody hell, Disney titles are absolutely they suck. Um, and you can make alterations, but make some alterations that I could do on my system that most people probably wouldn't be able to do as easy on their Trinov. Because you got, yeah, it's got a lot of things in its in that processor that you could do, but most people don't use a lot of it. It's got a bundle more than what than a Storm Audio processor. But I just look at it and think it's no more different than having an outboard um, DSP loudspeaker management crossover system. The only difference is they've condensed it down onto a chip, reducing um, the weight of the whole unit, the size of the whole unit, um, and electrical power. It needs a very high. It needs a very high It needs a very high gain type of processor because it's got such a bundle under the hood, and it needs quite a bit of CPU power uh, for processing without having glitches or artifacts and such that are going to be noticeable. Um, it's not too bad, but otherwise, like I say, outboard equipment, it takes up a lot of rack space, whether you have one U frame equipment or two U frame or three U frame, whatever, depending on the size of the unit. And it takes up rack space. And like I say, power as such, and heat as well. Heat is another factor. Those are all things to consider. But I'll just wait until one day someone's got a serious, why so serious? EQ, like the Joker. I'm going to make this speaker perfect. Ta-da! It's perfect. With 20,200p EQ filters per 32 channels. So we've got 32 channels with 20,200p EQ filters. And then you'd be able to correct that speaker. Spot on. It'd be like the holy grail. But no one's going to make such a thing because if they do, they'll be out of business. Or they could be in business. But I think they'll be out of business. Or all the others would be thinking, well, we got to do the same now. We can't do it with this because we're cutting corners and we're not getting anywhere near to achieving the goal. The rack doesn't. The rack, like, I see all these bloody fancy frequency graphs they show in the bloody videos, and I'm thinking, what resolution have they used? Are they using any smoothing on that? And because it should be no smoothing. You measure, like I say, get your bloody equipment if you can do it on your system. If you can't, then you need to go on eBay and buy yourself a booth cinema monitor. Connect it to your system, run a frequency sweep out from the processor, from your processor, ADR, whatever, or you can run it directly into the amplifier and run a direct frequency sweep without blowing your computer to smithereens because it's got certain voltage things on that processor to adapt the voltage signal. Otherwise, if you connect it to your amplifier, the computer, you're going to blow your input. You'll blow the input up on your computer. Um, so you'd be able to do these tests and then compare. And then that frequency response on the amplifier is roughly what you should be getting on the loudspeaker, but you're not. It's wiggly. It's all over the place. It's up and down. It's weird. And you think that is what needs to be corrected. That frequency response on the amplifier that's nice and smooth, that's your target curve. That's your target curve. You need to get those speaker components to follow that curve, providing, of course, the amplifier's got enough power. If it's not got enough power, you'll end up causing distortion and issues where you might damage your speakers or damage the amplifier. You've got to have enough amplifier power and make the EQ adjustments. Well, I think they've got to be done manually. Um, so I don't think there's an auto, something that can look at that frequency response and then you say to the computer or the dirac or whatever, get this frequency, I want this frequency curve to be like this. And it will take, then it'll start crunching all the numbers and using narrow filters, not no Q bandwidth, because every single one of those peaks that are going up and down in that frequency are tiny little frequencies that are causing the weirdness. If you start using Q bandwidth, it's got to use the very narrow filters, like someone that does art and craft, sewing with a needle, very fine, and using the needle and making a very nice um, jumper or whatever with a nice color, with nice color patterns on it, and that's done through very slow process, very fine thread, and that's that fine thread, the material used. That's how it should be on very fine thread cotton. That's what the frequency curves are like. Very narrow wavelengths, very to go through all that, right down to the longer wavelengths, and they're made up of very bits of frequency, and they all need to be adjusted until it all becomes that speaker now sounds bloody better than you can turn the EQ on and off, but it's got to be measured up close. You can't pull that microphone back in the room and do it. Otherwise, any one of those mids or high frequencies are going to have dips and nulls. You put the microphone in one position, play a sine wave tone 8 kilohertz, and it looks like it looks okay on the RT. And then you move it upward. Oh, the frequency's gone up a little bit more higher. Okay, I'll move it up a little bit more higher. Does it change? Oh, it's suddenly gone down again a bit. Dips and nulls. You measure it up close, you get a little bit more accurate. I mean, it's a little bit back in the room. You're looking around the room and thinking, bloody hell, where's that frequency getting altered? If you test it outdoors, you're not gonna see much of that up and down. You will see, once you go too high, the frequency response coming out from the HF, a tweeter or a HF horn, is gonna be more direct, so that's the shape of a horn. It's gonna be more direct in the middle, and on the angles going downward or upward, the off axis they call it, it's gonna be a little bit less. And if you have that HF horn, say this is a HF horn, and it's facing that way, playing a sine wave frequency of 8 kilohertz, I'm not going to hear it. If I turn it this way round, I would hear it. Turn it the other way, I won't hear it. If I play a sine wave tone via 1 kilohertz going that way, I would hear that frequency. If I face it toward me, I hear it a little bit louder. The frequency wavelength is a little bit more wider. When you go up into high frequencies, they become so pinpoint directional. And if they're not aimed in the correct locations, those frequencies would just go right over your head. You wouldn't even notice it. Um, and the same with low frequencies. So a speaker plays 20 hertz and it's very efficient, very capable. Would I hear a fundamental 20 hertz at a modest realistic sound pressure level? Because I should be able to hear it if the speaker's facing that way, that way. It doesn't really matter because it goes completely all around, omnidirectional until you get up to certain frequencies where they start becoming more directional. This JBL here can't do 20 hertz realistically. If I put my finger on the actual driver inside, yeah, I might feel it, but I wouldn't be able to hear it. It's way too small. It's only good for about, I think it's only good for about maybe 60 or 50 hertz, which is not too bad considering its size. And blimey, had they had this around back in the 1920s, it would have blown people's minds. Um, especially with the amplifiers that size, because back in the 1920s, amplifiers were pretty largish, valve amplifier and um, not very high power, but the loudspeakers themselves back then not very brilliant in their frequency response, but they did have a slightly high sensitivity on the horns, the horns they had. Things have changed a lot over decades. And they still are changing, even though manufacturers run out of ideas and they think, where's the next best place we can find information? Oh, the internet. This is if their team can't think of something, they go looking, they go on the search, but they don't give that person any credit whatsoever. They just go and steal information. That's why the audio industry is crooked. They think it's a bloody luxury. Oh bloody hell! There's you know, you can also buy all that other cheap rubbish Some of that actually, I wish was probably still works to this day. That was made in 1970s, maybe 80s, typically maybe 80s. You buy something and you think, wow, it still works. And the components and such on it are okay. Or you buy something from another type of manufacturer, I wouldn't say respectable manufacturer, but something that's like, wow, I'm surprised the capacitors on this amplifier are still okay. They don't need to be changed. They, they still work okay. Even though some would probably say, yeah, change the capacitors. You know, because they are decades. They are change the capacitors, which doesn't cost much. It's not a big deal to do. Oh, so what am I going to do today? Don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll put the microphones close to the screen because I haven't tested I haven't done a test yet recently since the screen speakers have been repositioned. Though they sound way better now than they did previous because they were way too high up. And now I'm hearing a bit more better detail, um, but it's still crooked on the frequency response because I know the frequency response on my JBL HF horns. I've seen the frequency response way too many times, and so I know what the characteristics look like, and there's just not enough PEQ filters that I have to correct it. I could thinking about connecting a Behringer DEQ back into the system, but then I would have to use that EQ as full range, full spectrum, full sound, full range sound for the screen channel left, 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 center, center, right, and then use the additional. I think there's only 8 or 9 PEQ filters that are additional that are probably maybe used for the high frequencies. So if there's any little weird things in the frequency that needs to be corrected, validate and corrected because I can't because if I don't want to cut too much frequency, got to look at it, analyze it, thinking, do I apply cut or do I apply boost? And it's got to be within tiny dBs. Um, and why? Why tiny dB? Is it going to make a world of difference? It should, because, like I say, the response on the amplifier looks perfect. The only thing that's imperfect is the loudspeaker. So no matter what it could be $1 billion bloody loudspeaker that costs $1 billion bloody dollars, and it still looks crap on the frequency response, unless they're using some alien 51 encounter bloody special technology on the that they can't talk about. And it's like, wow, I've not seen a speaker look like this before. This is something out of this world. But you're not going to get a loudspeaker that's like that. They're always going to look crooked. What's going on? Yeah, I know what's going on. I know what's going on. Yeah. Maybe Dirac should bloody make their bloody EQ a bloody hearing aids or something, for crying out loud. I wonder what the frequency response on hearing aids are like. Hmm, I'm curious. I'm curious about that. Maybe, maybe that's what we should wear, even if you haven't done, even if you haven't got like serious hearing damage. Um, I'm not sure what the frequency range goes on those sort of things. Can it go up to 20,000 kilohertz? Can it go up to 30,000 kilohertz? 30,000. Uh, not not that it's necessary, because music mixes, film mixes, are not even mixed that high, so pretty pointless. But at 20,000, um, I don't know. I have no idea. I'd have to go to downtown and say, "Hey, can I compare?" No, I don't have. I can still naturally hear high frequencies. I'm just kind of curious what these things actually do. Um, they probably don't, because they're probably only mostly designed for speech. So probably 8,000 kilohertz top, down to maybe 100. I don't know. Maybe they only cover the middle high frequency range. Because that's usually where it's got to be amplified, so you can make out a speech conversation. Otherwise, it's got to be hardwired or something to or stuff. Uh, uh, Interesting again with what I could do in my system. I could play a sine wave tone of 10,000 kilohertz or 12,000 kilohertz and literally play that sine wave on every speaker in the room. And the weird thing is when moving around, it doesn't change that much. Well, it does, but it is tiny. It only deviates a very few dB, because it's playing on multitudes, and so it's coming from many angles, from the floor, from the below surround speakers to the ones all around on the around here and the overheads. It's completely uniform and very disorientating sometimes. It's like listening on headphones. Only on headphones, if moving around slightly, it doesn't it doesn't wobble around. The sound doesn't go up and down because it's connected direct onto that direct close headphones. When it's multitude speakers, it varies, but it's tiny. Play it on a single loudspeaker. If I play it on a single loudspeaker in the room and move around, that frequency will go up and down drastically, depending on what frequency I'm playing. It would drastically change because I'm moving on axis with the sound and then off axis very far. Plus the dips and nulls and the frequency, in the null frequencies that go on within the room. Oh, yeah, and like I say, if you put it outdoors and test to see how much differences there are, there'll be very little differences outside compared to indoors because you've got a ceiling, you've got walls. The floors are relevant because you've got a ground floor surface outside. Depending on how high that speaker is elevated away from the ground surface, and you're going up with it. So you got say like a crane, and you could have that loudspeaker elevated up pretty high, and you're on a crane. Then you listen to how the sound from that speaker comes, the reproduction of it, the frequencies. How do they sound then? Um, or you could have a loudspeaker raised up and still be on the ground, and then have that speaker raised up high, aiming downward, so that the the high frequencies and everything are coming downward toward. Otherwise, if the speaker's going in the opposite, but you play those high frequencies, those high frequencies will go over the top of your head. You hear the other frequencies when it goes down lower in the sine wave tones. um, yeah, that's another thing. I've probably done that test. I've probably done that test. Like play a speaker overhead, play pink noise, listen to the tone and sound, and then listen to the same other JBLs that are more or less similar components. How do they sound on the side versus you know ones that are pointing downward over the seating area? Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, just waiting for just waiting. I'm just waiting. That's all I can do is wait. Wait for a serious manufacturer to come along that's going to take this whole EQ thing a bit more serious, but make it cheap. Make it serious, make it cheap. They sell like hotcakes. So it's like sometimes people like to go to the market and buy actual hotcakes, and someone's made a nice recipe, and you know, and you get there in the morning when they got the hotcakes there, but by just around about midday, they sell out because they're so damn good. And if they can make products that are successful, it's going to do what it's going to promise and not bullshit the public anymore. And they're going to sell like hotcakes. They're going to be in such high demand that every dub stage, mixing studio, they'll be using the same damn thing. And they'll be saying, crikey, yeah, this has made a measurable difference. And yeah, here we can show the frequency response of this loudspeaker, how it looked before and how it looks now. Where it doesn't have this crookedness. Because the components, they build them as well as they can. But, they're far from ideal. And why they got these bizarre frequency response dips sometimes in the range frequency range. Oh, it's beyond me. It's like the guy that does um, speaker modifications, and he's always critical of looking at how poorly the frequency response is. Danny, GR Research. I don't know why the guy gets a lot of stick most of the time, really, because, you know, he's only trying to improve the components from the original manufacturer, because obviously the original manufacturer didn't put a little bit more, enough effort into, and cut corners. You want something that's, speaker, really. I don't know that speaker. I mean, a speaker is, it's like someone told me one time once, a speaker is a speaker. It's the crossover that makes the speaker. And that's in some part way true, because you want that speaker to do a specific frequency range and then it roll off with a passive crossover where, yeah, depending on the roll off, uh, or the complexity of the components on the circuit board. And that's another thing. It is another thing that might get you thinking. Uh, the weight of that passive crossover, the actual size of it, and the weight. And then you take, say like um, a Behringer DCX, strip it down, just down to the circuit boards, because that's where all the components are. The housing, the casing, that's just the case there to protect the circuit board from getting damaged. Um, so if you take the circuit board and everything all out, and power supply and that, and then weigh how heavy it weighs versus, depending on what passive crossover. Some passive crossovers vary in size from small to pretty large, and the components on those circuit boards on those for those passive crossover, and then you think, it's this size, it's this weight, and then the components for the Behringer DCX, they weigh less, yet it could do more. But like I say, is it better than an active crossover? I've got one actual active. Well, I've got several active crossovers. I've got several active. Um, like Audio Science Review, they like testing. I haven't exactly tested an active crossover that I've got. I've got one up there on rack shelf. I've got an active two-way active crossover that's only designed for typical 500 hertz crossover. So it crosses over at 500 hertz on the bass and the high frequency. It's got very good control. Uh, but the frequencies are fixed, so I can't really change the crossover cards on it. Unlike other active crossovers where you can change the filter card, like remove it, put another filter crossover card in place. Um, I'm thinking of JBL 52 something series. I can't remember the actual model, but it's a one U-frame JBL, and usually they typically have little cards that they slot into the active crossover, and they're actually testing those things to see whether the crossover slopes are all identical. Do they overlap? They should overlap if doing a frequency sweep. They should have the same slope. Unlike when I tested passive crossovers, and they were like, there's slight variable differences, like they weren't overlapping. They weren't. Identical. Um, I've done frequency sweeps on the Behringer DCX where the crossover slopes are identical. Um, hmm, it's checking. You got to have your test equipment, and do all the checks. Checking. That's if you're seriously in, like, or that's if you seriously like audio. People like people like YouTubers, like that guy that's oh dear, with his trin off. Is he checked or validated all those speakers? Because he's raving how great they are, but he hasn't got one piece of test equipment in his system. So yeah, he does reviews and try to sell. He's trying to sell us bloody movies that we don't want to buy. Um, Spare change, really. Oh dear, what rubbish movie Atmos was he reviewing yesterday? Oh, I tell you, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. And the other review that he did about a few days before that, I wouldn't even touch that with a barge pole. Atmos rubbish that I really don't care. Twister. Everybody's talking about bloody Twister for crying out. I even have a conversation with one of the sound editors that worked on that movie. He particularly is not even interested in Atmos. You'd be surprised how many sound editors or mixers couldn't give a hoot about Dolby Atmos, including one mixer who said something about Atmos a few years ago. Um, and this was in a video on YouTube somewhere, and no, they didn't mention the name of the re-recording mixer, but they mentioned how many Academy Awards he won, and then I thought, I know exactly who they're talking about. They're talking about Gary Summers, and he basically trying to say that Dolby Labs are only trying to keep Atmos relevant, and he's absolutely right. This Atmos is a load of rubbish because if you don't know how to use it mixing wise, stylistically, artistically, then you're going to have a lousy rubbish sound. And Dolby Labs, they're just trying to keep this bloody Atmos bloody relevant now for bloody 12 years. Crying out loud. It's old news. It's nothing. Everyone keeps talking about it, about Atmos like like it just came out early this year. It's been around for 12 years. Oh, for crying out. And in that space of time, I've only heard one decent movie that sounds decent enough. And I think I've had enough of buying Atmos 4K discs, titles that look terrible in picture quality, way too dark. It's like watching a dying xenon lamp on a projector that's only got a few hours of lamp lamp time on it. Why are they making it look so dark? There's a thing called brightness and contrast controls that we have on our projectors or TVs that can make it look dark, and or we can have additional parameters that can alter all the different grades of color in this day and age of digital, yeah? But once that has been applied on a movie and you think, "Well, what bloody filters did they use? Because I want to correct it and get this stupid darkness restored back to how it's supposed. It looks better on bloody Laserdisc Twister. It looks and it sounds way better on Laserdisc and the stupid 4K. I couldn't care less about picture line resolution. As long as it's got the colour there. I've seen some screen captures of that Twister where it shows the sky is green, and I'm thinking, "What the blazes is wrong with this screen capture? That never looked that way in the cinema. It's way too dark." And this thing has been ongoing for many years. Why do so many rubbish 4K movies of old movies look rubbish? Garbage in, garbage out your system. And then add more insult to the injury. It's a near field mix, crying out. What a bloody oh, you wanna show off your oh, yeah, your system's got bass and all that, but if you compare that with the Laserdisc, you're gonna be turning it down a few notches. And you think, "Oh, whoa, that's too much." But if you're gonna brag about your home theater, 150 dB, but then don't moan about it. 150 dB, who plays this that stupid guy on YouTube that plays playing his home theater at 150 dB, and this M wave stupid thing, this M wave that they do in America now. They've been bragging they're gonna play a system at 140 dB, and they're saying yeah, and they're talking about this youth man talking about bloody earplugs. Well, the system's gotta be load of rubbish then, huh? Gotta be a load of trash. It's gotta be play at that stupid sound pressure level. I've been to UCI High Wycombe. I don't know how they did it there, but the bass never once hurt my ears. The loudness on the HF horn was loud, exciting, didn't hurt my ears. I didn't put my fingers in my ears. That's 1990, and the bass, it felt like a cat, a cat with its paws walking across my chest. Where do you get bass that's like that? I'll tell you, the base that was in that High Wycombe was out of this that was bloody Area 51 technology, whatever, but it doesn't exist anymore. I can certainly sincerely remember how it sounded with the movie Arachnophobia. Flipping opening titles on that music score on that bass was out of this world. I mean, I was thinking, "Where the heck's all this coming from?" You know, I know there's speakers behind the screen, but I can't see where the surround speakers or where they are located because there was all this fabric material. So I can't see if there's anything additional behind that material, any additional outboard sub-bass speakers. I don't know, but it was absolute out of this world. And you don't need a Trin of 40 grand plus with a bass wave forming effect. I felt all that decades ago, and it was pretty uniform around the auditorium. Not be 100%, but it was pretty damn good because standing at the back of the auditorium, just getting a slight preview of what the THX sound system was like, and it was just literally a quiet scene in the movie where it's just playing the music score at a very mild level, in the jungle scene where they find the spider in a glass jar or plastic jar, and though me and this other guy, we got to High Wycombe a little bit too late because the film had already started. We had to wait till the next film show to come back and see it. I wanted to have a peek to see what it was like because I've experienced the Empire Leicester Square and I wanted to check it out. And my goodness, I saw a preview of the film only in December at the Odeon downtown. It's screen number 6, or what at the time I think it would have been screen number upstairs. The original screen downstairs was number 2, but had since been renumbered. Anyway, it was renumbered, and I saw a preview of that show in December. It was okay, but the bass sound and everything, I only heard it. I didn't feel it. But my goodness, when I stood at the back of the auditorium, it was pressing against it was on my hair, my face, my chest, my stomach, my legs, even my shoes, for crying out loud. It was uniformly pressing. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm convinced. I'm blown away. Not that it blew me off my feet, because it would take a lot of air pressure to do that, but it was so damn wow. It was like finding the second holy grail in THX sound to get bass that uniform. And then when, of course, we went to see the film, we sat from the front row. It was about one, two, three, four, five. I think 5 or 6 seats back from the very front, because that's where my friend said recommended we should sit because he's been there many times. He's seen many films at that cinema in THX. Um, and it was absolutely spot on. It was spot on. It would blow that Trinov rubbish out the water, because what the weird thing is, they had less sub-bass speakers in that auditorium. Most of the bass is coming from the screen channel, and because it's an optical soundtrack, Dolby SR, they'll be using optical bass extension, so they'll get a little bit more lower octave through the sub bass, but most of the bass is going through those stage channels, and whatever, maybe through the surrounds, whatever. How it was done in that auditorium was absolute. And all I have to do is play to try and find a way to get in near to that. I just play the THX. I think it's the Broadway. 'Cause I don't think it was THX Wings they had. So it's very difficult for me to remember if it was Wings or Broadway. But either way, if I play any one of those 2 trailers, and then I think I know exactly the moment that trailer plays, you start feeling it you can feel it. The moment it plays, it's like putting your hand on a bass driver. The moment you play the sound, you feel it through your fingers or your hand. But to get that to start feeling it, so it goes into the seating, and therefore you will feel it in your body. Or I suppose if I were to stand up and decouple myself away from that seat, do I still feel it? Mm, because I certainly felt it at the back of the auditorium, and that was on a very quiet scene in the movie, and it was literally. And when the deeper notes play, the deeper bass notes, it felt like someone taking their hand and pressing it against my body, which will be kind of intrusive. And that's like, whoa! It's like sometimes, like I say to someone, I say it felt like this. Indulge me, so I press my hand against their body, and I see their reaction on their face, because it feels kind of intrusive, and it was kinda like that. And when you get the bass kicks, you can feel it in the chair. Oh, flipping heck, brilliant. Don't need Trinnov bass waveforming, because if it was achievable decades ago, then you can do it other ways and do it affordable. Because however they did it back then was through science, through trial and error, I would guess. Many headaches and testing until they got it spot on. And once it's spot on, that's it, leave it. And it's gonna play and reproduce a movie soundtrack like you've never heard it before or felt it before. Because nearly most cases when you go to a normal cinema, you just maybe feel a little bit of it now and then, but High Wycombe was, like, way beyond. It would even put the IMAX in the dust, and I'm talking about the BFI in London, or not that I've been there, but IMAX are usually pretty much, you know, I felt IMAX 70 millimeter local, and it was like, yeah, it was okay, but it was nowhere near High Wycombe, nowhere near. Empire Leicester Square, yeah, it was okay. It still put IMAX in the dust, but because Empire had hard parallel walls and it had a bit of an echo issue, but its bass range was still pretty damn phenomenal compared to watching the same film many times local and then comparing it at the Empire and thinking, "Wow, is that what I've been missing on the soundtrack? I didn't know that was those low frequencies or that jolt or that vibration that I just felt. I didn't even know that was possible. I've not heard or felt that since the days of Sense-Around, because after Sense-Around, every other film sounded just like a regular film, reproduction on the sound playback. Um, the Sense-Around was generating an artificial low frequency. Because back then, they didn't know how to do low frequency recording that onto film until they figured it out, and then Sense-Around was soon then going to be obsolete within a few years after Star Wars came out, because 1975 was probably the last movie they had, Battlestar Galactica or Battle Galactica Star Part Number 2 or whatever it was in Sense-Around. I think I've only seen one Battlestar Galactica, which ended up with bloody tinnitus, that for Christ's sake. Because they're playing those sound pressure levels at ridiculous level. You go to someone's, I mean, sometimes it gets a little bit too much in my room. I'm first to admit. I mean, if, um, there's certain ways you can get a sound pressure level to play and design it so it would only go up to a certain level and it won't go any higher. Um, but you've got to have outboard, mostly outboard PA equipment, or though the Storm Audio's got audio limiters on it, those audio limiters could be set so that you've got to rehearse the film soundtrack. You've got to make sure it's capable of playing these SPL levels smoothly in the low frequencies, and then have a limit range where it would only go to a certain level and it won't go any higher. So you can have it play comfortable at 90 dB and still feel it. in reality, in the real world, we don't feel bass pressing against our body. It's only certain things, like me doing this, with my hand there, and I'm doing that. I'm feeling a vibration jolt. If I do that, I don't feel it. If I put my arm against my knee, I feel a vibration jolt in the bed, in the springs mechanisms, and I feel a nice uniform like vibration. If I do that, I can feel a vibration. If I decouple myself away from the bed and did that, the vibration would be slightly different. It's setting things up so that you can feel um, the soundtrack. You can't do too much with a TV and its little tiny speakers. Or I mean, I could do quite a bit with this. I can put that onto a piece of um, fabric, a bed sheet. Pull that bed sheet very tight. Put that put this little speaker in the middle, and I would feel sound vibration transmission going through that fabric. Now then, it's just working things out and seeing, thinking, hmm, what's possible in physics? What can be done? What can be achieved? How affordable they are, and what results they can bring to the table. I mean, like holding that just in my hand sometimes, and I could say to someone, "I can feel the sound of your voice in my hand." Uh, Otherwise, we don't feel traffic, street traffic level, pressing against our body, or an aeroplane that's taking off. We don't feel it pressing against our body. Oh, in a movie, it's a little bit unrealistic, and that's where things, you know, the mixing process and everything is for psychoacoustics and such is a little bit out of place, and because marketing Dolby Atmos like a lifelike dimensional feel every dimension. They say feel every dimension. What does that mean? To feel every. It's a clever bit of bullshit marketing. Otherwise, like I say, speakers have been used on the ceiling as far back as I can remember. It's not nothing new. There is nothing new there except the process of what they can do today is mixing discrete sound, and that's the only difference. Otherwise, speakers on the ceiling is old news. It's like yesterday's fish and chips newspaper. Um, yeah, EQ, EQ, EQ. To EQ or not to EQ. One time I was EQing the room just with the DCX, the Behringer, and you've only got 9 filters on that DCX. That's not a lot. It's not a lot that you can use. I mean, you gotta cut corners, like drastic, really cut drastic corners using cube bandwidth. Um, you've got to evaluate the frequency response and then make some judgment decision, thinking, should I use a bit of cube bandwidth here? But and then maybe a narrow band filter here, and Q bandwidth, that is, narrow, the bandwidth, that's bandwidth. So widen the Q bandwidth, very wide, where you can make it narrower and center it on that frequency, um, where it should be really done. But there's not enough filters. But one time I did it, and it sounded like, "Oh, crikey, I can't hear all those high frequencies very easily." And another thing is now, because the HF horns have been repositioned, Star Trek, 4, The Voyage Home, where there's a where Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock are walking along the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. Some of the detail and some of the sound effects are sounding a little bit more clearer now. Plus, though it's still got a bit of a sound fault on the actual transfer itself, where a cyclist goes from left to centre to right or moves along the screen. Yeah, the derailleur, the chain, the gear, the clicking sound. Um, that should have the same timbre sound going from left into centre and then over into right as it exits off screen. But it's still like it's still got a bit of a fault in the transfer on that, except for the Blu-ray. No, except for the 4K version, which, mind you, the picture quality on that 4K looks absolutely atrocious because it's using a fake digital grain effect. It looks like noise on the picture. It just looks terrible. Um, and plus, the 7.1 sound is not necessary. That film was only released in 6 track, mixed, released mixed for 70 mil for 6 track, mixed Dolby stereo, and then they do an up and then do create a 70 mil print mix. Um, yeah, that is still that's improved. But, yeah, I can hear it a little bit better now because the screen, but I would need to put to hear the timbre matching. I would have to put an additional EQ filter on the HF horn for the right channel and raise the frequency up quite a bit, where it would become just audible. But I'm thinking not all the sounds that I heard on right channel are having an issue. It's it's the actual track itself for the sound of the stem track, the actual individual track that's got the fault, or it could be that someone, when they were mixing, transferring the title to disc from film to disc, they made a slight goof or they purposely did it on purpose. Um, and those are the things are called nuances. Those are the details that I listen for. Most people that talk about nuances are, for God's sake, they just use those fancy words, but they can't even, people like Youth Man and Shane Lee Spedge, they can't even mention what the bloody hell they just bloody listen to, and they just use fancy words like nuances, like to brainwash the rest of you masses of sheep into thinking, what the bloody hell's nuances mean? For Christ's sake. They can't even explain it. So basically, the nuances, the details in the DVD transfer of Star Trek 4 and on Blu-ray, it's a little bit botched up. Whereas on the 4K, it's like someone was reading my post on a forum somewhere. Someone came across and read it, and someone's corrected it because they've probably gone and listened and think, bloody hell, yeah, it sounds okay here, but when it gets to the right channel, it's like the frequency of the sound is dipping down way too low. You can barely hear it. Those are nuances. you had something that's a perfect mix and and put purposely put a sharp, uh, uh, frequency cut and low EQ bandwidth out so much, and then cut the level down on left, center, right, uh, and there would be certain sound effects there that you probably wouldn't even notice. I doubt even Shane Lee or Youth Man or even Gene Tasella, the Holics or what. I doubt those characters would even notice. Is there are they watching the film? Are they really watching the film? I'm watching and I'm looking, and I'm thinking suspiciously sometimes, I'm thinking on certain films, I'm thinking, "Hmm, I wonder if there's some really high frequency there." And so I go and check it because I'm suspicious. I bet all the other chat, they don't even have that instinct. And, oh, yeah. We all know that Master and Commander sucked on Blu-ray because they used a frequency filter on the damn thing and cut off all the low end. Oh, God. And they call it a lossless master audio. Yeah, DTS. They call it a master audio. How can that possibly be a master audio when it's been completely sabotaged with a bloody filter chopping off all the low end? I think everyone said it's 30 hertz. What? So it's not gonna have any extension down to 20 and then below 20 with all that cannon fire, all that infrasonic, huh? The DVD's more lossless audio, and it's not even called a lossless audio, it's lossy, and yet it's got the full frequency response, so therefore it must be lossless because it's not got anything lossless. There's nothing there that's gone missing. Oh dear. It's like putting a bloody X on a map. Where's the buried treasure now, huh? Oh, crikey. Uh, oh, we don't know because somewhere it's off the map here that we got a 30 hertz, about 48, 24 dB octave, and we can't. It's like looking around for the bloody what's it in the mad world, you know? Yeah, and it's a big W, a big W. It's like saying the woofer bass is over here. Bloody hell. I can't trust Blu-ray. I can't trust it. Weird. It's just a load of marketing bullshit just to try and sell the same movie again, an old movie, and just keep reselling it. Hold on. Hello. Yes, yes, speaking. Which is it for? And which is it? Yeah, yes. Which is it specifically for? Can you give me more? Can you clarify the details a little bit more? Or- Is it an assessment or is it an operation procedure? Oh, yes, yes. Okay, can you send me the detail by letter?
You don't have to do a big printout and all that. Save paper. Just write it down on a little. Or I'll just type it in. Maybe it was delivered, and I got my mailing in my kitchen is a little bit unorderly. Maybe I just can't remember it. But thank you for clarifying. Correct, correct. Yeah, correct. Tell me the date again. July. Um, 11. I'm typing it. 11:45 a.m. Which is that on East Wing, West Wing? So it'd be on the West Wing. Ground floor, or upstairs, or first floor. Ground floor. Okay, West Wing. What's the name? No, I'm typing it. I'm typing it down. I'm typing it down. What's the actual ward? What's the actual depart? Sorry, what's the actual department called? Out Outpatient. Um, and what's the name of the actual? Is it cardiac? Yeah, I know. I know. I know the hospital pretty much uh, like my backhand now. Been down there so many times. Doctor. Okay, so I'll just come in and go into the West Wing and look for the outpatient for cardiac. What's it usually meant? What usual letters is it mentioned by? Or it might be a series, or it might be a couple of letters that are only mentioned, like say like CC or D or whatever. Or because I know outpatient. Okay, outpatient cardiac and Dr. Hinton. I probably won't have any trouble finding him. So 11:45 July. You can send me an additional letter, but I've just typed it down. So okay, okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ta. Take care. Take care, love. Bye bye. Well, gosh, golly, that's for my cardiac, for my heart. So I'm going in for oh gosh, supposedly I'm going in for soon. I'll be going in for surgery procedure. Um, I could tell you it's heart AF or whatever it is. It's no day at the bloody beach. Garbage trash. I feel like garbage trash most days. Never known anything like it. I'd rather trade it for a toothache. At least a toothache can be dealt with. Um, mm, how do I feel today? Even though all this EQ nonsense, it gets under my skin. It vexes me with all the bullshitters on YouTube and all the bullshitters on Audio Science Review, all the bullshitters on the AVS forums, all the bullshitters. It really makes my pulse go high because I know I'm reading bullshit most of the time because most people are too scared. What the bloody hell are you scared about? A moderator shutting you down for speaking out and speaking free speech? Bloody hell. I tell you, free speech doesn't even exist on AVS Forum. Oh, you got this. Oh, that's not bad. That's not too bad, that reading. Though this meter thing does give a little strange reading sometimes. I haven't checked my blood pressure today. Haven't checked my blood pressure. Okay. This week, difficult to fit. Oh, this is difficult to fit. Oh, not easy. No, it's not easy to fit. Yeah, I've got to get it to fit correctly. That's about right. That's good. Okay. I didn't check the. Oh, my battery's getting low. Should be able to do it. Or I've got to do it again. Put it on the power supply. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, cry out loud. Ah, damn. Son of a bitch. Oh, come on. Oh, fucking hell. Oh, bloody hell. Oh, 8. Okay. All right, let me put those numbers in. Mm, just take the print screen. Got a print screen on that. Oh, that's okay. Hmm. Oh, turn that off. Got to charge that up. Battery's getting low on that. That's why I had to do that pump thing 3 times. Oh, bloody uncomfortable it feels sometimes. This. Yeah. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So just put those figures. Not been too bad the last couple of days. Yeah, as long as all the bullshitters don't wind me up. And again, you haven't got heart AF. It's a drag. It's a real drag. God, bloody uncomfortable that is. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, 70. Oh. Mm. Trying to think of the other thing that people talk about sometimes. I'm just trying. Remember what it's called, what word, what they usually mention, word. Maybe I'll talk about amplifiers. Amplifiers. I could get a very small type DIY project, very, very low power. It's got to have a sufficient so it's got to have a sufficient power supply to run it with the current. Now, I'm talking tiddly, tiddly little bloody amplifier on a circuit board that might be 5 watts or something. 5 watts. Well, 5 watts normally, theoretically, that should be more than enough to power my HF horn, providing it doesn't clip or the signal distort. You know, sensitivity on those HF horns are 100 and 115, I think. So quite sufficiently sensitive. Not that not that they needed to play at the max level that they are capable of in a small room, or very near to them, closely, whether it's out outdoor or whatever. You don't need to be that near to them, crying out loud. But I wonder how that would test if I bought a very small little and then a little power supply to run that, very small transistor like little tiny little amplifier. And uh, what? Um, what's it? Of course, it'd be running with the rest of the system. Any hiss, any noise, signal noise ratio. What would the signal noise ratio be like? Would it have produce an audible hiss? Would it be fairly quiet? Hmm. So it's not a problem on the amplifiers I'm running. Not a problem. Hmm. Can you hear the difference between this amplifier and another amp? Or can you see the difference on the RTA? Yeah. Where are they digging for the well of the souls? On that ridge. The map room is over there. Come on, let's go. What we hear with our own ears, I suppose you could call it end game sound because it is, at the end of the day, it is the most legitimate sound that we can hear. No, it's not repeatable unless you're recording very, very high grade recording, digital recording to record it without any weird artifact sounds being produced onto the recording. Any no noise, because if I wasn't hearing hissing in my left ear, which is tinnitus, sometimes it's both ears, sometimes it's quiet like that. This today in my left ear is about that sort of loud. It's hard to describe the actual loudness. Uh, it could fade off maybe during the afternoon. It might fade off, or I'll just get some sleep and it'll fade off because it's been quiet for the last few days. I don't know what's triggered it. Maybe it was yesterday, but I didn't play that. I didn't play Star Trek Five for Voyage Home very loud yesterday. Um, Might have been a day before or something. I played. What the heck was it? Can't remember what movie it was. Uh, oh no! Or the day before that, was it the Black Hole? The Black Hole, yeah. So I did a specific tuning on the system. And it was the sound was just pressing against my body. You just feel it. It made the movie more exciting. Like, it's like, wow, you don't get that quality on a TV speaker, even though it's a Disney mix. Um, it's got certain things with dialogue passages, like they don't have a kind of full open dynamic range. It seemed like there's a scene in the movie that it sounds like it's been audio compressed. Um, what's the dialogue where the robot, the robot is the Vincent robot is trying to make its way out through an elevator door, and then you've got the Maximilian robot standing in the way, um, or hovering, floating in front of its path. And the captain of the spaceship, the captain, he raises his voice at the other Dr. Reinhardt. He raises his voice, but it doesn't sound like it's got real dynamic to it. It sounds compressed. I was just kind of curious. I wonder if it sounds that way on a very, very early laserdisc pressing. Um, Even though I think the audio on the laserdisc, I think one is analog audio, another laserdisc has got analog and PCM digital sound. Just kind of curious if it was mixed that way originally, or if it was remixed Disney in the late 90s, and they just use the same mix over and over again. Don't do anything different. It does seem a bit restricted on the dynamic range and the dialogue. Should sound like it's raising the voice, yelling. Otherwise, I could do a recording, buy myself a Cubase, something simple. You get a new version of Cubase and put the sound into it and do the processing, mixing, look at the frequency response, and then use some apply some audio compression, uh, and then play it back and think, "Ugh, that sucks," and then play back the original and think, "Yeah, that's better." But sometimes we don't like to listen to people yelling, shouting, and screaming. Because when you do, it 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 creates a kind of distortion on our own ears because it's going over an 85 dB level. It's getting into 90s and can get into 100 or something, and it starts to sound very shrilly. Like, yeah, and that's natural. That's a natural voice yelling. Yet when you hear it in a recording, it's like how well are the components on that speaker reproducing that sound? Because a speaker in a box may have dampening materials. Uh, there's a thing going around many years ago. If you put a certain amount of extra dampening material inside the enclosure, can give the impression to the bass to sound like a few dB more louder or a few more dB higher by putting extra dampening material inside the like pillows. Get some pillows and stuff them inside the enclosure. Just trial and error and um, do a frequency sweep without pillows and stuff pillows in and do a frequency, what the frequency response looks like, as well as any other thing going on within that enclosure that might make a very odd sound, harsh frequencies or something in the even though the bass frequencies shouldn't hurt our ears, it might be 100 hertz or somewhere between 100 and 200, whatever, depending on what crossover range is set on the speaker. Pillows don't cost much. So how many pillows would I need to stuff inside my JBL cinema subs? One, two, one, two. Yeah, because they would stack easily horizontal. So if I laid a pillow, put a pillow in there horizontally, and put another pillow on top and another and another. How many pillows? One, four, three, three, four, five, six. I think maybe six pillows, if not seven. 6 or 7 pillows. And then if the test looks okay, I might keep those pillows in there. If it doesn't look okay, if there isn't much real change, then what the heck am I going to do with all those pillows? I'm not going to keep them in the sub. I'm going to take them out, and then what the heck am I going to do with all those pillows? Because easily the pillows are easily going to cost probably £6 a pillow. Oh, what the heck am I going to do with all those pillows? But it should make a difference. Wow! 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 Bet it talks to me now. Wow. Wow. Yeah, he's talking to me. Wow. 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 No, he's not talking now. Wow. Wow. Are you talking there, Bear? Are you talking? Wow. Wow. Oh, well, Bear, you're trying to knock things on the floor, aren't you? You're knocking things on the floor. Wow. He wows at me. Wow. 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 He's talking to me. Uh, anyway, I'm off now. So yeah, yeah. Go and get some. Go and get yourself an oscilloscope. Spare change, really. Get a oh, for Pete's sakes, buy a voltmeter as well. Yeah.